Hey guys, tonight we're sliding a hand under the mattress of the perfect 1950s housewife and pulling out what she hid there. A 25-cent paperback with a half-dressed woman on the cover and a story scandalous enough to get the whole street talking. Not a Bible. Not a cookbook. Not the Reader's Digest she keeps on the good shelf for show. No, a cheap drugstore novel that the post office wanted to seize, the church wanted to ban, and Congress wanted to read aloud, racy parts and all, purely for the nation's protection. Before we tuck in, do me one kindness and give the like button a quiet tap. And if the hush of forbidden history is loosening your grip on the day, the subscribe button is waiting a tap away. And tell me in a comment which sleepy town is keeping you company, and what book your grandmother would sooner have died than let anyone find. Now settle in. Kill the lights, switch on the fan, pull the blanket up close, and maybe slide your phone somewhere your mother-in-law would never think to look. So how did a book you could buy next to the aspirin become the most dangerous object in the house? Why did a grown woman need a getaway plan just to buy one paperback? What do you do with a book you cannot return, cannot keep, and cannot be caught holding? Could you smuggle a novel past a husband, a mother-in-law, and a curious 5-year-old in one afternoon? And what exactly do you say at the bridge table when everyone swears they only read it for the writing? Congratulations, you just woke up in 1955, in a tidy little town where the pharmacy sells scandal by the quarter. There is a fresh paperback burning a hole in your coat pocket and a cover on it you cannot let anyone see. The wire rack by the door is still squeaking behind you. And before you reach your own front step, you have to decide which drawer your husband is least likely to ever open. Good luck. You have a prescription to pick up, or at least that is the official reason you are standing near the front of the drugstore where the wire rack turns. You came in for aspirin and a spool of thread, and both are already in your basket, but your feet have carried you to the spinning tower of paperbacks by the door. You are not going to buy one. You are simply looking, the way a respectable woman looks, with your chin level and your eyes doing something else entirely. The rack turns under your hand, and it squeaks. It always squeaks. Every rack in America squeaks at exactly the pitch designed to announce that a woman is browsing books she has no business browsing. You give it a slow, casual turn, a woman who might be after a crossword magazine or a nice clean mystery. The covers slide past. A cowboy, a detective, a nurse in obvious distress, and then the one you actually came for, a woman in a slip looking out at you like she already knows. You do not stop on it. Stopping is fatal. Stopping is how they know. So you let it rotate past and come back around on the second pass, the way you return to a thought you are pretending not to have. The trick, perfected over months, is to keep your face arranged in the expression of a woman mildly bored by literature. Your mouth stays flat, your eyes do all the work, and your eyes have become accomplished liars. Behind the counter, Mr. Pruitt, the pharmacist, counts pills into a little tray and does not look up, which is the great mercy of Mr. Pruitt. Somewhere in his career he decided that what women read is between them and their own consciences, and he keeps his gaze on his mortar and pestle with the devotion of a man who knows precisely where not to look. You could kiss him for it. You do not. You spin it one more patient turn. There is a science to the brows, patient, practiced, and utterly silent, and you did not invent it. You inherited it. You learnt it watching other women make the same slow orbit, and now younger women learn it by watching you. A whole silent apprenticeship conducted at the wire rack in the art of wanting something in public without appearing to want it. It is the only finishing school that ever taught you a practical skill. The spinner itself has opinions. It leans a little, so the bottom row sits just out of reach, which means the most desperate titles, the ones the store is faintly embarrassed by, get shoved down where a woman must crouch to reach them. Crouching is a confession. Crouching says out loud what the browse only murmurs. So the boldest books live at ankle height, and retrieving one becomes a small athletic event you perform while pretending you have merely dropped a glove. Now another woman drifts in, sets her basket 2 feet from yours, and begins her own slow circuit of the other one. Neither of you speaks. Neither of you needs to. You both know why you are here. You both know the other knows, and you keep the fiction airtight with the flawless discipline of diplomats meeting at a contested border. She reaches the bottom row. You develop a sudden, studious interest in the toothpaste display, purely to grant her privacy. This is courtesy. This is the whole unwritten code observed to the letter by two strangers over one squeaking rack. You have not bought anything yet. You may not buy anything today at all. Sometimes the browse is the entire event, a small dose of possibility taken standing up, just enough to carry you through the week. You give it one last turn, memorize the cover you want the way you would memorize a face, and drift back toward the aspirin and the thread as though none of it ever happened. The rack squeaks once behind you, like it is filing a report. You have made your choice. The book is in your hand now, spine down, cover turned toward your palm, and between you and the register there are about 6 feet of black and white floor tile. 6 feet does not sound like a distance. You have walked 6 feet 10,000 times without thinking, but you are calculating this particular 6 feet the way a person calculates a river crossing, because at the end of it stands the clerk, and the clerk has eyes, and the cover in your hand has a woman on it in a slip. The distance is not really the problem. The witnesses are the problem. There is the clerk, a slow young man named Delbert, who bags with excruciating care and, you are certain, reads every title in his head with his lips moving. There is the woman behind you in line, already craning. And there is the plate glass window, through which the whole sidewalk of your town can watch a housewife buy a novel with a barely dressed woman on the front. You take the first step onto that short, exposed, and completely terrifying stretch of tile anyway. Your strategy is speed married to nonchalance, which is a difficult marriage. Move too fast and you look guilty. Move too slow, and Delbert has time to sound out the title syllable by syllable. So you aim for the pace of a woman buying postage stamps, brisk but bored, and you carry the book angled against your hip like a card player shielding a hand from the table. The cover, meanwhile, seems to be getting warmer. You are fairly sure it is not, but it feels like it is broadcasting on a frequency only clerks can hear. Halfway across, disaster nearly strikes. Mrs. Aldrich from 2 doors down materializes near the greeting cards, and Mrs. Aldrich is the single most efficient distributor of news in the county. You alter course by 6 inches, tuck the book flatter, and greet her with a warmth so violent it startles you both. She asks after your mother. You answer while performing the most important magic trick of your week, which is making a paperback disappear against your ribs through sheer force of conversation. The book, to its credit, cooperates. It lies flat. It stays hidden. It does not slither out and land cover up at Mrs. Aldrich's feet, which is the recurring nightmare you have about this exact walk. You have rehearsed the recovery 100 times in your head, the casual laugh, the "oh, that old thing," and you have never once believed it would work. Delbert receives you at last. Here is the delicate moment, the exchange, when the book must leave your hand and enter his and lie exposed on the counter for the length of one transaction. You set it down fast, title first, and immediately pile a magazine on top of it as though the magazine were the thing you came for and the book merely fell into your basket by accident, an unfortunate stowaway. Delbert lifts the magazine. He lifts the book. He turns it over, reads the price on the back with agonizing thoroughness, and says 25 cents. He says it the way other men say your secret is safe with me. Your heart does not know the difference. You have the correct coins ready in your palm, warm from being clutched since the parking lot. No fumbling for change. Fumbling for change extends the moment, and the moment is the enemy. You pay, you take the small paper bag, and the whole thing is finished in under 9 seconds. A personal record you will tell no one about because there is no one on earth you could tell. Out on the sidewalk the air is cool and enormous, and you are, briefly, triumphant. 6 feet of tile, crossed under full observation, and no one the wiser. You tuck the bag deep into your coat. The whole operation from browse to escape took less time than boiling an egg and cost you a coin and a year of nerve. You would do it again tomorrow. You probably will. You keep a quarter separate from the rest of the grocery money, folded into the corner of your coin purse where the household budget cannot see it. 25 cents. That is what the forbidden costs, exactly, and the precision of it is part of what makes it possible. A hardcover would cost $3 and would have to be explained. It explains nothing. A quarter is what you spend on a chocolate malt, and nobody audits a chocolate malt, and so the quarter goes quietly from the purse to the counter. The genius of the price is that it lives beneath notice. $3 is an event. $3 appears in a budget, gets discussed at the kitchen table, invites the question of what exactly $3 went toward. But it is loose change, small, spare, and beautifully forgettable. Money too small to have a conscience. You could buy a scandal a week for a year and the total would still hide inside the grocery slush like a single guilty raisin in a very large pudding. Mrs. Farrow next door does the arithmetic out loud one afternoon over the fence, not knowing she is describing you exactly. "A quarter here, a quarter there," she says, wiping her hands on her apron. "It is not real money, is it?" It is not, you agree, with the straight face of a woman who has spent more coins this way than she would ever confess to a priest. The fence, thankfully, keeps no records. Consider what the same coin buys elsewhere. A gallon of gasoline nearly, a loaf of bread and change back, a phone call and a stamp. Ordinary things, forgettable things, the small denominations of an ordinary life. And then, on the wire rack, that identical coin buys you an entire other woman's inner life. 6 nights of somebody else's forbidden feelings, printed on paper cheap enough to burn. It is the best value in the whole economy, and it is the one purchase you can never list. The 25-cent price was not an accident of the market. The men who ran Fawcett and Gold Medal set it there on purpose, because they had done the same arithmetic Mrs. Farrow did over the fence. They knew a coin that small slips past a husband's attention where a dollar snags. They priced desire at exactly the height a woman could reach without anyone noticing her arm move. They were not moralists. They were merchants, and they had found the softest, steadiest market in America, and its currency was pocket change. You have developed a small ritual around the coin itself. You choose it in advance, the least worn coin you can find, and you set it aside so that at the counter there is no rummaging, no spilling of the purse, no cascade of pennies rolling under the display while the whole store turns to watch. The exact coin ready in the palm. Preparation is dignity. Preparation is the difference between a woman running an errand and a woman visibly caught. There is something almost tender about how cheap the whole thing is. The great scandal of your week, the object the church denounces and the post office hunts, costs less than the ribbon on a hat. You could fund a lifetime of secret reading on the change your husband leaves on the dresser every night without ever missing his own money. He funds your rebellion coin by coin, and will go to his grave believing he never contributed a cent to anything of the kind. The quarter does not tell him. Quarters are famously discreet. The coin goes across the counter. The book comes back. The coin goes across the counter. Somewhere, a merchant in New York adds your coin to 9 million others and builds an empire out of exact change, and you carry your 2 bits of rebellion home in a paper bag, having spent, by any honest accounting, almost nothing at all. You have decided that the pharmacy on Main Street, the one 4 blocks from your house, is out of the question. The man behind that counter went to your wedding, so on the days you want a book, you take the long way, past the edge of your own town and into the next one, to a drugstore where the clerk does not know your name, your husband, or your mother. It costs you gas and an hour and a small lie about where you have been. The math is simple and unforgiving. Buy it in your own town, and you are buying it from people who will see you at church, at the school, at the funeral of somebody you both knew. Buy it 1 town over, and you are simply a stranger with a quarter, a face nobody files away, a woman who could be anyone passing through. So you make the drive, and the drive itself becomes part of the pleasure, an hour that belongs to no one but you, nameless, distant, and gloriously anonymous, out there. The lie you tell to buy the hour is small and reusable. You needed a particular thread they were out of at home. You wanted to look at the fabric at the better store. You were just driving, clearing your head, which is the one true thing in the account. Your husband does not question it, because a woman driving off to match thread is the least suspicious creature in the American landscape, roughly as alarming as a mailbox. The far drugstore is run by a stooped man named Mr. Okafor, who does not know your name and has no wish to learn it, and this indifference is the finest hospitality you have ever received. He rings up your book without a flicker and slides it into a bag with hands that have handled 10,000 quarters and judged not one of them. You want to thank him for something he does not know he is providing. You say, "Keep the penny," instead, which is as close as you can come. There is a particular freedom in being unknown. At home you are a wife, a mother, a name attached to a house and a pew and a reputation that must be maintained like a lawn. Here, 40 minutes down the highway, you are nobody's anything. You could buy the boldest title on the shelf and walk out into a street full of people who will never think of you again. Anonymity, it turns out, is a kind of vacation, and it costs exactly 1 tank of gasoline and a plausible errand. You always buy the thread too. This is important. The thread is the alibi made physical, the evidence that the trip was what you said it was, and you would no more come home without it than a smuggler would come through the border with an empty suitcase and a nervous smile. So there is real thread in the bag, on top, where a husband glancing in finds exactly what he was told to expect. Underneath it, the actual cargo. The thread is the cover story you can hold in your hand. On the drive back, you feel the two towns rearrange themselves in your mind. There is the town where you are known, where every purchase has a witness and a memory. And there is the town where you are free, and the 11 miles of highway between them has become the most useful stretch of road in your life. You have friends who never make this drive. You simply have a wider country than they do, and a fuller coat pocket. The odometer tells a story your husband will never read. He might notice, someday, that you put more miles on the car than a woman-matching thread strictly requires. He has not noticed yet. And if he ever does, you have an answer ready about how a person needs to get out of the house, which is, again, entirely true. The best lies, you have learned, are the ones that are also true. You just leave out which town and why. You know the man at the register. Everyone knows the man at the register. He is a deacon at the church 3 pews ahead of yours, he coaches the boys' baseball team, and he has a way of looking at your purchases and drawing conclusions from them. Today, your purchase includes a paperback with a lurid cover, and you are about to hand it to a pillar of the community. You practice your face on the way to the counter. Bored. Slightly rushed. A woman running an ordinary errand. His name is Mr. Halloran, and Mr. Halloran believes in things. He believes in the ladies' auxiliary bake sale, in the moral instruction of the young, and in keeping a wholesome establishment, a belief he expresses by displaying the paperbacks near the door, where God and everyone can see them, which is either a great courage or a great oversight. You have never decided which. He rings up your aspirin. He rings up your thread. His hand reaches for the book, his face level, polite, and carefully blind. You watch his face the way a sailor watches weather. There is the possibility of the raised eyebrow, the small pause, the gentle observation that this is not quite the reading a lady of your standing might choose, delivered in the tone he uses for boys who swing at bad pitches. You have your reply loaded and ready, something breezy about a gift for a cousin who does not exist and has never existed and has, over the years, received a truly scandalous library from you in her imaginary life. But Mr. Halloran, it turns out, has a policy, and the policy is that his eyebrows stay level during business hours. He rings the book without comment, though a muscle near his jaw performs a small dance of restraint, the look of a man swallowing a sermon whole for the sake of a sale. Commerce and conscience meet at his register every day, and commerce, quietly, keeps winning, 1 quarter at a time. He needs the quarter more than he needs to save your soul this particular afternoon. The great unspoken fact between you is that Mr. Halloran sells more of these books than anything else in the store, and that the women buying them are the same women arranging the altar flowers on Sunday. He knows this. You know he knows. And the whole town runs on a shared agreement never to say it aloud, a treaty of mutual blindness signed by everyone and printed nowhere. He hands you the bag. Your fingers do not touch. This is on purpose, on both sides. There is a version of this errand where he does say something, and you have lived through it once, with a different clerk, a younger one who had not yet learned the treaty. He held up a title and read it aloud, cheerfully, cruelly, and the 2 women in line behind you went very still, and you felt your whole face turn a colour that does not appear in nature. You bought it anyway. You have never gone back to that store, and you hope the young man learned, from the silence he created, exactly what he had done. Mr. Halloran, whatever his private thoughts, has learned. He counts your change into your palm rather than onto the counter, so you need not scrape it up under observation, and there is a decency in that small choice that you will remember longer than any sermon he has ever half preached. You thank him. He nods. The nod contains a whole conversation neither of you will ever have. You leave with your scandal in a paper bag and your dignity mostly intact, and behind you the deacon turns to the next customer and rings up, without comment, the next quarter's worth of sin. On Sunday you will see him pass the collection plate, and he will see you drop your envelope in, and you will both nod again, the same nod, and the town will go on believing itself far more innocent than its own cash register could ever confirm. You do not simply buy the book. You build a purchase around it the way a smuggler builds a false bottom into a trunk. Into the basket go a magazine, a box of hairpins, a card of buttons, a tin of aspirin, and somewhere in the middle of that respectable pile, invisible, the paperback. The trick is the stacking order. The book must never be on top, never be alone, never be the thing the clerk picks up first. You have gotten good at this. You are, in your quiet way, a professional. The camouflage purchase has rules, and you learn them the hard way. Rule 1. The decoys must be plausible, wholesome, dutiful, and entirely innocent. A woman who buys only a scandalous novel and one unrelated item looks exactly like a woman buying a scandalous novel with a flimsy alibi. A woman who buys 9 sensible things and one novel looks like a woman doing her shopping. The novel needs a crowd to hide in, and so you assemble the crowd first, a little parade of hairpins and headache powder marching in to give one guilty paperback somewhere to stand. Rule 2. The top item must be boring past all suspicion. You always crown the pile with something so wholesome it practically hums a hymn. A box of oatmeal, a spool of white thread, a jar of cold cream. The clerk's eye lands on the oatmeal, files you as oatmeal, and by the time he reaches the book he has already decided who you are, and who you are is a woman who eats oatmeal. People rarely revise a first impression. You weaponize this daily. Mrs. Petrakis, who taught you half of what you know without ever meaning to, once bought a mop bucket, and a mop head to bury a single paperback, and carried the entire mopping ecosystem 3 blocks home in the rain rather than let the book ride alone. You think of her every time you shop. She overdid it, God rest her thoroughness, but she was never once caught, and in this particular field a reputation for excess is a reputation for survival. Rule 3, the hardest, is that you must not appear to have a strategy. The whole performance collapses if you look like you are performing. So you shop the way you breathe, unhurried, a little distracted, reaching for the aspirin as though the aspirin were the point and the book merely fell into your orbit. The moment you telegraph care, you telegraph guilt. The professional smuggler is bored. The professional smuggler yawns. You have practiced yawning. There is an art to the checkout itself. The placing of the items on the counter in the right order so the book arrives sandwiched, already surrounded, never standing exposed on the cold surface alone. You lay down the magazine, then the book, then the hairpins on top of the book, a little sandwich of respectability with one scandalous filling. The clerk lifts them as a set, rings them as a set, bags them as a set, and the book is never once a soloist. It sings only in the chorus, and the chorus is very wholesome indeed. You've wondered, occasionally, what a stranger would make of your grocery receipts if they were ever compiled. The endless hairpins, the mountains of aspirin, the cold cream by the case, all of it purchased in service of hiding one thin book at a time. You would look, on paper, like the most headache-prone, well-pinned, thoroughly moisturized woman in the state. You are none of those things. You are simply a woman with something to hide and a genius for the ordinary. The ordinary, it turns out, is the finest hiding place ever built. Nobody searches a woman doing her shopping. Nobody stops the parade of hairpins to ask what it is really carrying. You have made dullness into a disguise, and it is the best disguise there is, because no one has ever once looked twice at a woman being dull on purpose. You have figured out the schedule, because figuring out the schedule is how you survive. The paperbacks arrive on a truck, the same truck that brings the magazines, and they come on a particular day each week, and if you time your visit right, the rack is full of titles nobody in town has seen yet. Arrive too late and the good ones are gone, picked over by women exactly like you. So you have learned the delivery day the way a fisherman learns the tide, and you plan your errands around it. The truck comes on Thursdays. You did not find this out by asking, because asking would announce the very interest you spend your whole life concealing. You found it out the way women find out everything useful in this town, by watching, by noticing, which mornings the display stood full and fragrant with new titles and which afternoons it stood picked bare. Thursday morning, you concluded, and you have never once been wrong. Thursday is your day, reliable, early, and fiercely defended. The driver is a heavy-set man named Mr. Brodsky who wheels in a hand truck stacked with bundled magazines and, tucked among them like contraband riding with the mail, the flat brown parcels of new paperbacks. He drops them at the counter, exchanges 3 words with the clerk about the weather, and rolls back out, never once suspecting that he is the most important delivery man in the emotional life of half the women on your street. He thinks he delivers magazines. He delivers Thursday. You arrange your whole week around him without appearing to arrange anything. The roast gets planned for Thursday because the good butcher restocks Thursday, which gives your errands a shape no one questions. So you are already downtown, already carrying a basket, already a woman with legitimate reasons to be near the drugstore at the exact hour the new titles hit the shelf. Coincidence is your finest craft. You manufacture it by the yard. The competition is real, and it has a name, and the name is Mrs. Calloway. She has cracked the same schedule you have, and on a bad Thursday you arrive to find her already stationed at the spinner with the unhurried confidence of a woman who got there first, working slowly through the new arrivals while you pretend to need aspirin you do not need. You do not acknowledge each other. You simply orbit, two planets locked around the same small sun, each waiting for the other to leave a good title behind. There is an etiquette even to the rivalry. You do not snatch. You do not reach past another woman's hand. If she is holding a title, it is hers, even if she has not decided to buy it, and you wait to see whether she sets it back with the small regretful motion that means it is now fair game. The whole silent negotiation happens in the space of a minute, conducted entirely through elbows and timing, and no man who ever watched it would understand that a transaction had occurred at all. Arrive too late, past noon on a Thursday, and the display tells a sad story. The best covers are gone, claimed by the early and the informed, and what remains is the leftovers, the westerns and the war stories, and the one lonely romance nobody wanted. Half empty, it has the look of a party after the good guests have left. So you guard your Thursday. You protect it from dentist appointments and school functions and every other obligation that tries to colonize it, defending that one morning window with a ferocity you would never admit has anything to do with a wire tower of quarter novels. To the world, you are simply a woman who does her shopping on Thursdays, reliable as the tide. Only you know that the tide, in this case, runs on Mr. Brodsky's route sheet, and that you have memorized it more faithfully than you have memorized anything since your wedding vows. You have brought the book home, and now you face the real problem, which is where it lives. The mattress is the classic answer, and you understand why the moment you lift the corner, your husband will never look there. He does not make the bed, has never made the bed, and regards the underside of the mattress as a place that simply does not concern him. So the book slides in flat, between the mattress and the box spring, and the bed settles back down over it like a lid. The bed is the perfect accomplice, and it does not even know it is one. It sits in the middle of the marriage, shared, ordinary, made every morning by your hands, and unmade every night by both of you, and the whole time it is keeping your secret pressed flat inside its own body like a letter in a coat. Your husband sleeps 8 inches above the forbidden every night of his life and dreams of nothing in particular. The bed says nothing, lying there silent, patient, and completely trustworthy. The bed is a professional. The mechanics matter. The book must lie flat, dead center, well away from the edges where a tucked sheet might drag it into view, and never in a stack tall enough to change the way the mattress sits. 1 book is invisible. 3 books is a lump, and a lump is a question, and a question is the beginning of the end. So you ration the mattress like a careful landlord, 1 tenant at a time, and when a new book arrives, an old one has to be evicted, burned, or passed along to keep the census down. Making the bed becomes a small daily performance. You strip the sheets, you snap them clean, you tuck the corners with hospital precision, all of it choreographed to move around the flat rectangle underneath without your hands ever drawing attention to it. If your husband happens to help, on the rare mornings he does, you develop a sudden, urgent interest in his side of the bed, steering him away from yours with the smooth misdirection of a magician keeping the audience's eye off the pocket. Mrs. Yardley, 2 streets over, kept hers under the mattress for 6 years, she told you once. In the lowered voice these confidences always use, and her husband found it only when the old mattress finally wore out and had to be hauled to the curb. The book slid out as the men tipped it into the truck. He picked it up, looked at her, and said only, "Been wondering where the springs went soft." He never mentioned it again. He bought a new mattress that Saturday and never once asked what she had wanted to keep from the old one. There is a strange intimacy in it that you try not to examine too closely. Every night your husband lies down on top of everything you have never told him, the whole quiet library of your inner life, and rests his weight on it, and sleep soundly. You lie beside him and feel the small, firm shape of it through the mattress, a private continent an inch below the marriage. Some nights you press your palm flat to the sheet, just to know the shape of it is still there. In the morning, you make the bed again. You smooth the spread, you plump the pillows, you set the whole innocent scene back in order. The book waits underneath, patient, flat, keeping its own counsel. The bed holds its tongue. Between the two of them, they have kept more of your secrets than your own mother ever did, and neither one has ever asked for a single thing in return. Not the bed, not the book, not once. You have more than one book now, and the mattress is getting crowded, so you have become a cartographer of the hidden corners of your own house. You know which drawers a man never opens. The sewing basket, under the spools and the folded patterns, the lining of the winter coat, shoved to the back of the closet in July, and the box of sanitary napkins, which is the safest place in the entire home, because there is no force on earth that will make your husband look inside it. That box deserves its own chapter. It is the single most secure location in the American house, sealed, unopened, and forever safe, more inviolable than any bank vault, guarded not by locks but by a squeamishness so total that a grown man will walk past it every day for 30 years and never once let his eyes rest on it. You could hide the crown jewels in there. You hide a stack of paperbacks instead. Behind the one door in the house fear itself keeps shut for you. The sewing basket is your second fortress, and it works on a related principle. A man does not sew, does not know what belongs in a sewing basket or what does not, and so cannot tell a rogue paperback from a legitimate bobbin. The basket is deep, layered, archaeological, a mound of thread and thimbles and half-finished hems, and a book buried at the bottom is protected by the sheer uninviting mystery of the whole apparatus. He would sooner defuse a bomb than go spelunking through your notions. The winter coat is a seasonal vault, brilliant precisely because it is out of season. In July, nobody thinks about wool. A slim book tucked into its lining rides out the summer in total safety, and you keep a standing reminder to retrieve the tenant before the first cold snap sends your husband groping for his overcoat. Once, in a hurry, you slid a slim one into the flour canister and forgot it there until the biscuits came out with a corner of cardboard baked into the pan. You fished the book out with a fork, blew the flour off the cover, and read it that night anyway, the pages dusted faintly white for a week afterward. You do not use the flour canister now. Some hiding places announce their own limits, and the kitchen, it turns out, keeps terrible secrets, being the one room where things are meant to be opened. Your mother-in-law is the reason none of these places are permanent. She visits without warning, she tidies without invitation, and she has a nose for disorder that borders on the supernatural. She has been known to reorganize a drawer she was never asked to touch, to alphabetize a spice rack out of sheer moral energy, and every hiding place in the house is chosen with one eye on the terrible possibility of her fingers finding it during a helpful straightening you never requested. The sanitary napkin box defeats even her. It is the one border she will not cross. So you rotate. You keep no book in one place too long, moving your small library through the house on a schedule only you understand, coat to basket to napkin box to mattress and back, a quiet migration that never settles because settling is how things get found. It is exhausting, this constant relocation of a contraband you paid a coin for, and you do it anyway, because the alternative is a conversation you would rather crawl over broken glass than have. Sometimes you stand in the middle of your own tidy home and marvel at how many secret compartments a house contains once a woman needs them. The rooms look open, honest, nothing to hide. But the house is riddled with pockets only you can see, a whole hidden geography folded inside the visible one, and you move through both at once, the wife in the bright rooms and the smuggler in the dark seams, and no one who visits ever suspects the house is keeping anything at all. You wait until the house is asleep. The children went down hours ago, your husband is snoring in the reliable way he has, and the only light is the strip that leaks under the bedroom door from the hall. You read by that, and by the little you can angle from the street lamp, with the covers pulled up and the book held close to your face. One ear stays awake the whole time, listening past the sentences for the creak of a floorboard, the cough of a child, the change in your husband's breathing. The strip of light under the door is your whole world for the next hour. It is thin, gold, and unreliable, brightening when a car passes on the street and dimming when the furnace kicks the hall bulb into a flicker. and you angle the open book toward it like a plant leaning at a window. Your eyes ache. Your arm goes numb from holding the pages at exactly the height where the light can reach them. You have never been more awake in your life. Close, patient, and completely still, the whole dark. The house at this hour has a sound to it, a settled ticking, the furnace breathing, the icebox humming its one low note in the kitchen, the small clicks of a wooden house cooling in the dark. You have learned every voice in that chorus because your safety depends on hearing the one note that does not belong, a floorboard on the landing, the particular creak of the third stair, the change in your husband's breathing that means he is surfacing toward waking. You read with one part of your mind and stand guard with the other, a sentry who happens to be enjoying a novel. Your husband sleeps the deep, boneless sleep of a man with a clear conscience and an early alarm, and you love him for it. Tonight, more than most nights, because his obliviousness is the roof over your whole operation. He turns over. You freeze, the book flat against your chest, until the turn resolves into more snoring. Then you breathe again and find your place. This happens 6 or 7 times an hour. You have become very good at losing your place and finding it again in the dark. The children are the other front. Down the hall, a small body sleeps, and small bodies wake for no reason, padding toward your door with a bad dream and a loud question at the worst possible moment. So you keep the book at chest height, ready to vanish under the covers at the first pad of a foot, and you keep your voice preloaded with the sleepy, reassuring murmur of a mother who was definitely asleep and definitely not doing anything at all. You could win an award for that murmur. You have earned it in the field. There is a particular sentence you are reading toward, and the whole clandestine effort is for that sentence, the one where the woman on the page feels the exact thing you have felt and never said. When you reach it, you stop. You read it twice. You lie in the gold thread of light with your husband snoring beside you and your children dreaming down the hall, and you feel, for a moment, met, seen, accompanied by a stranger who wrote it years ago and priced it at pocket change and had no idea you would be here, holding it toward the light all these miles and years away. Eventually the light gets to be too much, or too little, or your arm gives out, or the risk tips past the pleasure, and you slide the book back into its hiding place and lie flat and let the dark have you. You will not remember falling asleep. You never do. 1 minute you are in the gold strip with the stranger's sentence, and the next it is morning, and the book is hidden, and you are a wife again, rested, ordinary, and secretly, quietly full. You have started removing the covers. It began as caution and has become a small ceremony. A book with its cover on can be identified across a room. A book with its cover gone is just a brick of yellowing paper that could be anything. So you take the kitchen shears, or you simply work the cardboard back and forth until the glue gives, and you separate the lurid painted woman from the pages she was selling. The cover you burn or bury. The story you keep, naked and anonymous, safe now. Quick, quiet, and strangely merciful, the good shears. The covers themselves are little masterpieces of misdirection, and you have come to admire them even as you destroy them. Some artist in New York, a man named Robert Maguire or one of his rivals, was paid to paint a scene far more scandalous than anything actually in the book, a promise the pages rarely keep. The woman on the front is always more undressed, more desperate, more available than the woman in the story, who is usually just lonely and specific and real. The cover oversells. The book quietly overdelivers. Once the cover is off, the transformation is complete and strangely freeing. What remains is anonymous, a slab of cheap paper with no face, no title screaming from the front, nothing to betray it at a glance. It could be a manual, it could be a hymnal, if a hymnal were printed on paper this poor. Stripped. The book becomes portable in a way it never was before. Its dangerous identity peeled away and fed to the stove. The first cover you ever cut off you kept for a week before you could burn it, a woman in a green slip looking off the edge of the paper at something you could not see. You told yourself you were saving it for the artist's sake. Really, you kept it because throwing it out felt like a small cruelty. In the end, you fed it to the stove on a Tuesday, watched the green slip curl and brown and vanish, and felt, absurdly, that you owed her an apology. You did not strip the next one half so slowly. Mrs. Okonkwo, who runs the lending end of your sewing circle, insists on the opposite, and you understand her position even as you disagree with it. She keeps her covers on, all of them, because to her the cover is half of what she paid for. The art, The promise, the small defiant beauty of the thing. She would sooner cut off her own hair than take the shears to a Maguire. You have seen her collection, cover after glossy cover, and it is magnificent and reckless and exactly the kind of evidence that ends a marriage. You keep yours faceless. She keeps hers proud. You are both right, in your way, and only one of you sleeps easy. The stripped covers cannot just go in the household trash, where a curious hand might find a painted woman staring up from the coffee grounds. So they get their own disposal, torn small and buried at the bottom of the ash can, and you have become a person who thinks carefully about the destruction of book covers, which is not a sentence you ever expected your life to contain. When it is done, when the woman on the front has gone to ash and the pages sit anonymous in your hand, you feel a small, grim satisfaction, the satisfaction of a smuggler who has filed the serial numbers off. The story is yours now, untraceable, wearing no face but the one you give it. You did not want to hurt the painted woman. You simply could not afford to be seen with her, so you kept her secret the only way you could, which was to take her apart, gently, with the good kitchen shears, and let the plain truth of the book survive her. You have finished the book, and finishing it presents a decision that a library book never would. You cannot return it. You cannot shelve it. You cannot, in most cases, keep it, because keeping it means the risk lives on in the house indefinitely. So some books you feed to the kitchen stove before the family wakes, watching a quarter of forbidden pages curl and catch. A book that took you one night to read is gone by breakfast, and the only evidence it ever existed is inside your own head, when nobody has jurisdiction. The stove is the usual method, and there is a grim efficiency to it that you have made peace with. Early, before the house wakes, you open the firebox, feed the pages in a handful at a time, and watch a quarter's worth of somebody's forbidden feelings curl brown and catch and go to light. The paper is so cheap it burns fast, greedily, gone almost before you can regret it. By the time the coffee is on, the evidence is ash, and the kitchen smells only of coffee, and you are, on the surface of things, a woman who lit a fire to take the chill off. It catches fast, greedy, and utterly final. You do not enjoy it. That is the part you would want understood, if there were anyone you could explain it to. Burning a book you loved feels exactly like what it is, a small execution performed for reasons of safety, and you perform it the way a person does a hard necessary thing, quickly, without ceremony, trying not to read the pages as they go. Sometimes a line catches your eye on its way into the flame, one last sentence, and you have to look away, because you do not want your final memory of a book you loved to be the sight of it burning. The incinerator in the backyard is the alternate method, reserved for the bolder titles, the ones you want gone from the house entirely and not merely reduced to ash in the kitchen where the smell might linger and invite a question. Out at the incinerator, in the grey light before the neighbours are up, you feed a book to the fire the way other people feed it letters from a life they are trying to leave behind. Mrs. Delacroix next door does hers at dawn too, and the two of you have nodded at each other across your respective fences, each holding a poker, each burning God knows what, and neither has ever asked. There is a cruel arithmetic to it that you try not to dwell on. A book that took a skilled woman a year to write, that travelled from New York in a brown parcel, that survived the browse and the counter and the walk and the hiding place, ends its whole journey in your firebox at 6 a.m. because a marriage cannot contain it. The book was braver than its ending. So were you. And still it burns, because bravery and safety have never once been the same thing, and you have chosen, this morning, as most mornings, safety. Not every book meets the fire. The ones you cannot bear to burn you pass along, which is its own kind of survival, a book living on in another woman's hiding place instead of dying in yours. But the truly dangerous ones, the ones that would end you if found, those you keep for no one, those you read once, slowly, memorizing what you can, and then you give to the flame, alone, at dawn, the sole reader that story will ever have in this house. You are its whole audience and its executioner both. By breakfast it is done. The ash is stirred down, the firebox shut, the kitchen bright and smelling of coffee. Your husband comes down, kisses your head, asks what you have got planned for the day. Nothing much, you tell him, and pour his cup. And the story you loved goes on rising out of the chimney into the ordinary morning air, where no one will ever think to look for it again. You are not the only woman on the street doing this, and you learn that without a single word ever being spoken plainly. It moves through the ordinary channels. A book comes back to you at the bottom of a returned casserole dish, wrapped in a dish towel. You hand one over the fence at the clothesline, folded inside a pillowcase you are pretending to lend. The network runs on laundry and leftovers and the daily traffic between kitchens, and the men who live in those kitchens never notice a thing moving through it. The casserole dish is the workhorse of the whole operation, and it does not know it. A dish goes out full of tuna and comes back full of paperback, and no man alive has ever inspected the false bottom of a returned casserole, because no man alive has ever returned a casserole. The dish travels a route only women can see, kitchen to kitchen, and rides its cargo through the neighborhood, tucked under a folded dish towel, warm from nothing, innocent as pie. Quiet, patient, and completely invisible, the whole network. Mrs. Tran, 3 doors down, runs her end of it through the clothesline, which is a small work of genius. She pins up her wash, you pin up yours, the two of you meet at the shared post with your mouths full of talk about the weather, and somewhere in the flapping laundry a book changes hands inside a pillowcase you are pretending to lend her. Anyone watching sees 2 housewives and a great deal of damp cotton. Nobody sees the library moving through the sheets. The network has no name and keeps no records, which is precisely why it works. There is no list of who has read what, no ledger, no evidence, only a set of understandings carried entirely in the heads of the women who maintain it. A book enters the street through one kitchen and surfaces weeks later 3 houses down, and no one can quite say how, the way a rumour arrives without a return address. It is the most efficient delivery system in town, and it runs on leftovers. The rules are unwritten and absolute. You return a borrowed book. You return it in the same condition, or better, cover intact, no marks. You never, ever mention a lender's name to a third party, because a name spoken aloud is a thread that can be pulled, and the whole web depends on no thread ever being pulled. A woman who breaks these rules is quietly, permanently cut off, and she is never told why. She simply stops receiving books and she knows. There is a tenderness in it that surprises you every time. Mrs. Delgado, 2 streets over, whom you barely know, once slipped a book you had been hunting for months into your grocery bag at the market, unasked, having heard through the leftovers that you wanted it. You never spoke of it. You did not need to. The book was the whole message, and the message was, I heard, and I understand, and hear. That is friendship conducted entirely in contraband, and it is realer than half the conversations you have out loud. Realer than most of them, if you are honest. You think, sometimes, that if the men who run the committees could see the true shape of it, the casseroles and the clotheslines and the grocery bags, all moving forbidden books through a town that officially forbids them, they would not know whether to be furious or impressed. They picture a threat. What they would actually find is a knitting circle with a distribution arm, a quiet postal service run by aproned women who never once raised their voices, moving one cheap novel at a time through the one part of the world the committees never thought to watch, which is the ordinary traffic between kitchens. You go to the beauty parlour every Friday, and the beauty parlour is where a great deal more than hair gets set. While the perm solution does its slow work and you sit under the dryer with your scalp tingling, books change hands. A paperback slides out of one woman's handbag and into another's, recommendations get made in low voices, and a title you have been curious about for weeks arrives in your lap with no ceremony at all. The dryer roars over everything. It is the safest conversation in town. The dryer is the great cover, a domed helmet of noise that swallows every word beneath it, and under its roar, a woman can say almost anything to the woman in the next chair. You sit there with your scalp tingling and your hair in curlers the size of soup cans, and you conduct, at a shout that no one 3 feet away can hear, the frankest conversations of your week. The dryer does not judge. The dryer only roars, and the roar is a wall, and behind the wall the real talk happens. Loud, domed, and beautifully discreet, that machine. Verna runs the shop and the second economy inside it with equal skill. She sets your hair with one hand and, with the other, slides a paperback out of the drawer beneath her station and into the pocket of your coat on the hook, all without a break in her chatter about her sister's ungrateful children. She has been doing both jobs for years, the visible one and the invisible one, and she is better at the invisible one, because the invisible one requires a discretion the visible one never will. The beauty parlour is the safest room in a woman's week, and everyone in it understands why. No husband has ever set foot inside. No man wants to, the way no cat wants a bath, and so the shop is a rare pocket of the world where the women are unobserved and know it. The talk loosens, the books come out, recommendations pass down the row of chairs like a bucket brigade, and a title mentioned under the first dryer has reached the last one before the setting lotion is dry. The physical handoff is an art form, and Verna is its master. A book goes from her drawer to your bag while she is ostensibly reaching for a bobby pin. A book comes back to her the same way, tucked under the cape as you settle in, retrieved as she fastens the neck. Her hands are always busy and always innocent, a magician working a full house, and in 20 years no one has ever caught the trick, because no one has ever thought to look for it in a beauty parlour. The loyalty in that shop cuts deeper than hair. Verna knows things about the women in her chairs that a priest would envy, and she has never once used a word of it, never gossiped, never let a secret slip toward a husband or a mother-in-law. She protects her customers the way a good bartender protects his, and the books are only the most obvious of the things she keeps safe. You tip her well. You both know the tip is for more than the hair. You leave the shop set and lacquered and quietly restocked, a fresh book riding in your bag beneath the scarf, your hair, a helmet, and your secret secure. On the sidewalk you pass a man who compliments the curls, and you thank him, and he has no idea that the real service you just received happened under the roar of a machine he will never sit beneath, conducted by a woman he thinks of, if he thinks of her at all, as the lady who does the hair, and nothing more. You still go to the public library, because a respectable woman goes to the public library, and the library is useful for reasons beyond the books it lends. You check out 2 worthy hardcovers, a biography and something improving, and you carry them home in your cloth bag. What the librarian does not see, and does not need to see, is the drugstore paperback riding between them, sandwiched in the middle where the respectable titles vouch for it. The bag looks exactly like virtue. You have learned to make virtue do the heavy lifting. You still go to the public library, because a respectable woman goes to the public library, and the 2 worthy hardcovers you check out are not just decoys, they are chaperones. A drugstore paperback riding between a biography of a president and an improving book about flowers is a paperback travelling in respectable company, vouched for by the volumes on either side of it. The good books are the character witnesses. The bad book rides in the middle, protected by their reputations, saying nothing. Sober, worthy, and thoroughly respectable, the whole bag. Miss Ashby, the librarian, stamps your 2 hardcovers with the small, satisfied thump of a woman confirming your good taste, and never once thinks to riffle the bag they go into. Why would she? You are exactly the sort of patron a librarian dreams of. Prompt, quiet, returning things on time, requesting the occasional biography. That you are also smuggling a cheap novel home inside the sober cloth bag is a fact her whole professional worldview has no room for, and so it does not occur to her, and so it never will. The genius of the arrangement is that the library gives you a legitimate reason to be carrying books at all. A woman walking home with a bag of books is not suspicious. She is edifying herself, and no one stops to ask which books, or to count them, or to notice that one of the spines is thinner and cheaper and lacks a library stamp. The bag is the disguise, and the disguise is transparently virtuous, and virtue, you have found, is the one thing nobody ever bothers to search. You do read the hardcovers sometimes, which helps. It keeps the cover story warm. When a neighbour asks what you are reading these days, you can speak with real feeling about the president's early years, because you genuinely have been reading about the president's early years, in the odd hour, as a kind of penance and a kind of alibi at once. The truth you tell keeps the lie you carry from ever being examined. It is the oldest trick there is, and it works because it is not entirely a trick. The library itself, you have come to feel, is quietly on your side, though it would never say so. It is the one civic institution built on the radical idea that a person should be allowed to read whatever she likes. And even if this particular library would not stock your particular paperback, its whole spirit leans your way. You feel a kinship with the building. You suspect Miss Ashby, if you could ever ask her honestly, might turn out to feel it too, and might have a paperback of her own, in a bag, going home. So the sober bag makes its trips, out heavy with respectability and back heavy with the same respectability plus one small stowaway, and the librarian smiles, and the neighbours nod at the edifying woman with her books, and the whole performance holds because every visible part of it is exactly what it appears to be. Only the invisible part is a lie, and the invisible part is one thin book, riding home in the dark between 2 chaperones who will never know what they escorted. or that they escorted anything at all. You belong to a sewing circle, and the sewing circle meets on Tuesdays, and a certain amount of sewing does in fact occur. But the circle has a second function that appears on no agenda. Among the thread and the thimbles and the half-finished hems, books move from bag to bag, and a woman who finished something good last week arrives ready to place it, quietly, into the hands of whoever she trusts. You joined for the company. You stayed for the lending library that hides inside it. The sewing does get done, is the funny thing. Hems are turned, buttons are set, and a stranger glancing in the window would see 6 women bent over honest work in a warm room, needles flashing, the very picture of wholesome industry. What the stranger would not see is the second layer, the books moving bag to bag beneath the table, the recommendations murmured over a shared spool, the whole quiet lending library folded invisibly inside the visible one, like a note hidden in a hem. Warm, frank, and carefully locked, that circle. Mrs. Cheng hosts. And hosting means more than the coffee. It means she keeps the master list, though the list exists only in her head, of who has which book and who wants it next and who returned what last week smelling faintly of stove smoke. She runs the circle's collection the way a librarian runs a branch, minus the building, the funding, the stamps, and any acknowledgement that a collection exists at all. She would make a magnificent public servant. She is instead a woman with a very good memory and a sewing basket with a false bottom. The plausible deniability is total, and that is the point. If a husband asks, his wife was at the sewing circle, and she was, and there is a mended shirt to prove it. The mending is the alibi, real and folded and smelling of hot iron, and behind the alibi the actual business of the evening proceeds unbothered. No one has ever had to lie about where she was, because where she was is exactly what she said. She simply leaves out the second agenda, the one printed on cheap paper and passed under the tablecloth. The talk that happens over the sewing is its own reward, frank in a way the rest of a woman's week never allows. Between stitches, protected by the shared task and the closed door, the women say things they would say nowhere else, about their marriages, their bodies, their boredom, their wants. The books started the conversations, and now the conversations have outgrown the books, and a woman leaves the circle each week having mended a shirt, borrowed a novel, and unburdened something she had been carrying alone since the last meeting. You joined, you remind yourself, for the company, back when you were new to the street and lonely in the particular way of a woman surrounded by people and known by none of them. The books came later, an unexpected dividend. But it is the combination that saved you, the needle and the novel and the low frank talk, the discovery that the other women in the room were carrying the same secret weight you were, and had built, out of thread and coffee and mutual trust, a place to set it down. So the needles flash and the books migrate and the coffee goes cold in 6 cups. And the circle does exactly what it appears to do and also something else entirely. And both things are true at once, which is the natural condition of nearly everything in a woman's life this decade. On the surface, mending. Underneath, a rebellion so gentle and so domestic that it will never once be recognized as one, conducted by women who came for the company and stayed for the quiet freedom of a locked door and a shared secret. You keep a shelf in the living room that is entirely for show. The Book of the Month Club selections stand on it in a proud row, spines out, and beside them the Reader's Digest condensed books in their matching bindings, announcing to any visitor that this is a household of taste and restraint. The shelf is a performance, and you are its stage manager. The books you actually read do not live on it. They live under the mattress, and the shelf exists precisely so that no one thinks to look there. The Book of the Month Club selections stand in a proud row, spines out, chosen as much for their bindings as their contents, and beside them the Reader's Digest condensed books march in matching formation, 4 novels crammed into each fat respectable volume, all of them trimmed of anything that might quicken a pulse. This is the shelf a guest sees. This is the shelf that says restraint, taste. A household that reads the right things in the right quantities and would never dream of anything cheaper. Proud, dusted, and completely fraudulent, every last spine. The condensed books are the perfect emblem of the whole performance, because they perform the exact laundering you perform yourself. Somewhere an editor took a real novel, found the parts that made it worth reading, and cut them out, leaving a bloodless summary safe for any living room. A wife can own a scandalous title in that pre-gutted form and display it with pride, the danger surgically removed, the reputation intact. You keep one on the shelf. You keep the uncut truth of the same story under the mattress. The gap between them is the gap you live in. When Mrs. Abernathy comes for coffee, she always drifts toward the shelf, because Mrs. Abernathy judges a home by its spines, and you have arranged the row precisely for her inspection. She runs a finger along the condensed books, murmurs approval, notes that you and she read all the same things, and you agree warmly that you do, while upstairs, 8 feet above her approving finger, sits everything the two of you actually read and would die before discussing. The shelf tells her she knows you. The shelf is lying on your behalf. You have curated the display with real care, which is its own small comedy. You choose the titles a respectable woman should be seen to own, arrange them by height, dust them weekly, and read almost none of them, because the shelf is not for reading, the shelf is for being seen. It is a stage set, a painted backdrop of a wholesome inner life, and you are both its designer and its only audience who knows it is fake. The books on it are props. The performance is continuous. The reviews from visitors like Mrs. Abernathy are uniformly excellent. One particular book on the shelf you keep turned just so, a heavy improving volume on the moral education of children, and it is the crown jewel of the whole fraud. No one who sees it on your shelf could imagine the woman who owns it creeping down a dark hall to read something the moral education of children would specifically forbid. That is exactly why it is there. The most respectable book in the house works the hardest, standing guard over the least respectable ones. A stern chaperone with no idea what it is chaperoning. You do not feel entirely honest about the shelf, and you have decided not to mind. It is a costume, and a costume is not a lie so much as a courtesy, a way of showing the world the face it has demanded to see so that the rest of you can go on existing unbothered behind it. The visible shelf keeps the invisible library safe. You dust it every Thursday, spine by spine, the most honest hour of housework you do, tending a row of books you will never open, so the ones you cannot put down stay hidden behind them. You have learned how to ask another woman for a book without ever quite asking. It is done in glances and half sentences and a particular tilt of the head. You do not say the title out loud. You say something like, "Have you read anything good lately?" And you let the emphasis land on good in a way that means the other kind of good, and she understands instantly, because she has asked the same question of someone else. The whole transaction happens in the space between the words, where no husband has ever thought to listen. It is done in glances and half sentences and a particular tilt of the head, and you learn the whole grammar of it without anyone ever teaching you a word. You do not say the title out loud. You say, "Have you read anything good lately?" And you let the weight fall on good in a way that means the other kind of good. And the woman across from you either understands instantly or she does not. And by whether she understands, you learn everything you need to know about whether she is one of you. You keep it mild, deniable, and perfectly precise. The code has levels, and you can read a woman's fluency in it the way a musician hears another's ear. A newcomer answers the question literally, recommends a nice clean mystery, and reveals herself as someone not yet in the circle, or perhaps not the sort who ever will be. A fluent woman hears the real question inside the polite one and answers it in kind, with a title murmured low, or a look, or an offer to lend you something, and the whole recruitment happens in one exchange over a back fence with no dangerous word ever spoken. Mrs. Ridley and you conduct entire conversations this way, in front of your husbands, at church coffee, in the full hearing of people who would faint at the plain version. You ask if she has finished her library book. She says she has, and that you would like it, and that she will drop it by. To the room it is the dullest exchange imaginable, two women discussing a library book. Between the two of you it is a promise, a delivery scheduled, a secret confirmed, and the pleasure of pulling it off in plain sight is a small electric thing you both feel and neither shows. The beauty of the wordless ask is that it protects everyone, including the person you are asking. If you have misjudged her, if she is not one of you, the coded question is deniable, harmless, a woman merely making conversation about books. No one is exposed. No one has to risk the plain sentence that could not be taken back. The code is a door that only opens for the person who already has the key, and to everyone else it is simply a wall, blank and polite and revealing nothing. You have wondered where you learned it, this fluency, and the answer is that you learned it the way all of it is learned, by watching older women do it and slowly understanding what you were seeing. An aunt, years ago, asked another woman a question about a library book in exactly that tone, and something in the tone snagged your child's ear even then, and years later, married and lonely and hunting, you found the tone rising in your own mouth as if it had been waiting there the whole time. So the questions go out, mild and deniable, into the coffee hours and the fences and the church basements, and most of them mean exactly what they say, and a few of them mean everything, and the women who can tell the difference find each other one careful sentence at a time. It is a language with no textbook and no name, spoken only by those who need it, in the middle of a world that would punish the plain translation, and you are, by now, entirely fluent. You proved it this morning, over the fence, in 11 words that both of you knew meant something else. You have noticed that these books almost always end badly, and you have learned to read around it. The heroine who loved the wrong person is punished by the last page, sent away, married off, driven mad, or worse, and you know by now that the punishment is not the story. The story is everything before it. The part where she was happy and alive, and the miserable ending as a toll the book had to pay to reach you at all. So you read to the good part, and you stop there in your mind, and you supply your own last page. You did not know, at first, that the misery was mandatory. You thought each unhappy ending was a choice, a sad accident of that particular story, until you had read enough of them to see the pattern, the same doom arriving on the same last pages of book after book after book. Then you understood. The endings were not written by the authors at all, not really. Sudden, cruel, and legally required, they were written by a rule, and the rule lived at the post office, and it said that a woman who loved the wrong person could not be allowed to get away with it. The rule was simple, and it was iron. A character who loved another woman had to renounce it, lose her mind, or die before the back cover, or the book would be seized in the mail and never reach the shelf at all. So the writers, wanting to be read, paid the toll. They let the heroine be sent away, married off to a man she did not want, packed into an ending that punished her for the exact happiness the book had spent 200 pages making you feel. The tragedy was the price of admission, and the writers paid it in their characters' blood. Once you learn to see the toll, you learn to read past it. The punishment on the last pages is not the story. The story is everything before, the part where the woman was alive and wanting and briefly, dangerously happy, and you have trained yourself to close the book a chapter early, in your mind, and leave her there, in the good part, before the rule catches up with her. You supply your own ending. Yours is kinder. Yours is the one the writer would have written if a stranger at the post office had not been holding the pen. There was one book written by a woman calling herself Vin Packer that half the street read that year, and the ending broke your heart in the specific way these endings were designed to. But you could feel the writer straining against her own last chapter, could feel her love for the character fighting the doom the rule required, and that struggle, printed right there on the page, told you more than any happy ending could have. Somewhere, a real woman had wanted to let her heroine live and had not been allowed. You knew exactly how she felt. Then came the ones by Anne Bannon, and Bannon did something quietly astonishing, which was to let her people survive. Her characters were not neurotic or doomed. They were warm and specific, and they walked off the last page still breathing, and reading that, for the first time, felt like a window thrown open in a sealed room. She had found a way to pay a smaller toll, or to hide the survivors where the rule could not quite reach them, and every woman who read her felt the difference like weather changing. So you read against the grain, decoding as you go, subtracting the mandatory sorrow to find the real story. It is a strange skill, learning to read a book past its own ending, and the world gave it to you for a reason it would never admit. It had decided your kind of happiness was obscene, and wrote that verdict into the last chapter of every book you were given. You read the verdict. Then you overruled it, alone, in the dark, one heroine at a time. You turn the book over and study the author's name, because half the time you cannot tell what you are looking at. Vin Packer. The name is built to be a puzzle. No first name a woman would obviously own, and no first name a man would obviously own, and you understand that the ambiguity is on purpose. Somebody wanted you unsure. Somebody wanted the postal inspectors unsure too. You run your thumb over the name and try to picture the person behind it, and you suspect, without being told, that she is a woman like you. The name is built to be a puzzle, and you have spent real time turning it over. Vin Packer. It is not a woman's name and not quite a man's. A deliberate smudge, and you understand the smudge is strategic. A reader cannot tell who wrote the book. Neither, more to the point, can a postal inspector who might be gentler on a lurid story if he cannot prove a woman wrote it, or harsher if he suspects one did. The ambiguity is armor, smudged, careful, and quietly protective, and the writer put it on before she ever reached you. You have become a small scholar of these names, because the names are one of the few clues you get about the people behind the books. Some are flatly male, chosen to pass, to reassure, to let a woman write from inside a man's supposed authority. Some are coy, androgynous, winking, and a few, once you know how to look, are almost signatures, a woman's real self folded into a false name the way she folds a real book into a false shelf. You do the same yourself every morning at the mirror, arranging the face the street expects. The one called Anne Bannon, you have decided, without any proof, is a woman exactly like you. You cannot say how you know. Something in the specificity, the way she writes a kitchen or a look or the particular loneliness of a marriage that is perfectly fine and not enough, tells you this was written by someone standing where you stand. You are right, though you will never learn it for certain. Behind Anne Bannon is a suburban wife writing at her own kitchen table and mailing the pages to New York, hiding in exactly the plain sight you hide in, and her books found you because you were both fluent in the same disguise. A strange companionship lives in the pen name, once you understand it. The writer hid her identity for the same reasons you hide her books, out of the same fear, ducking the same watchers. She is not some distant author safe behind a reputation. She is a woman who needed a false name to survive telling the truth, and you are a woman who needs a false shelf to survive reading it, and the two of you are engaged in the same quiet operation from opposite ends, passing the truth between you under cover of two invented selves. You have imagined meeting her, the real woman behind the smudged name, though you know you never will. You would not know what to say, and neither would she, and the whole relationship works precisely because it is conducted in code, page to eye, never face to face. She writes what she cannot sign. You read what you cannot admit. The false name on the cover is the bridge between two women who will never be introduced and who understand each other better than the people they eat breakfast with. So you run your thumb over Vin Packer, over Anne Bannon, over whatever careful invention is stamped on the cover this week, and you feel, through the false name, the real person straining behind it. The name is a locked door with a friend on the other side. You cannot open it, but you can stand close and read what she slid underneath. You have a complicated relationship with the cover, because the cover is the thing that betrays you. It was painted to be seen from across a room, a woman half-dressed under a title in shouting type, lit like the poster for a film you would never admit to seeing. That is wonderful when it catches your eye on the rack and terrible when it is in your hand at the register, announcing your business to the entire store. The very thing that drew you to the book is the thing that makes buying it an act of nerve. The cover was painted to be seen from across a room, and that is its whole genius and its whole treachery. A woman in a slip, lit like the poster for a film you would never admit to seeing, rendered by an artist who could make longing look like weather. The men who painted them were craftsmen. One of them, Barry Phillips, was so good and so prolific that the trade called him the king of the paperbacks, and another, Robert Maguire, painted more than 1,000 of them, a whole gallery of troubled, beautiful women who never existed, each one designed to reach across a drugstore and grab you by the wrist. It glows bright, painted, and dangerously loud. And grab you they do. That is the point of them. On the display, the cover is a small miracle, a flare of colour and trouble among the westerns and the crosswords, catching your eye and holding it, and promising a story more scandalous than any story could deliver. You are drawn in exactly as designed, a fish to a very well-painted lure, and you do not resent it, because the promise, even unkept, is part of what you paid your coin for. The cover oversells. You forgive it. You knew going in. The trouble begins the instant the book leaves the rack and enters your hand. The same painting that flagged you down from 30 feet now announces your business to everyone within 30 feet, a billboard you are obliged to carry to the counter. The cover has no discretion. It cannot be reasoned with. It broadcasts, at full colour, exactly what kind of book you have chosen, and there is no holding it that hides it completely, though God knows you have tried every grip. So you and the cover are locked in a strange partnership, allies at the rack and enemies at the register. It brought you here, and now it is trying to get you caught. You palm it, you flip it, you bury it under a magazine, You carry it pressed to your body like a hand of cards, all to muffle the very thing that drew you across the store. The lure, having caught you, will not stop flashing, and you have to spend the whole walk to the counter smothering the light that was the point of the whole thing. You have wondered about the women in the paintings, the ones who never existed, gazing out from 1,000 covers in their permanent slips and their permanent trouble. They were invented to sell you a feeling, and they did, and they will never know that a real woman in a real town risked real exposure to carry them home. They are bait, painted bait, and yet you have come to feel something almost like loyalty to them, these beautiful accomplices who lured you into a book that turned out, past the cover, to be about someone as real and as lonely as you. In the end, the cover always meets the shears, because the thing that sells the book is the thing that cannot be kept. The painted woman who called to you across the store becomes, once she is home, a liability too loud to house, and off she comes, gorgeous and dangerous and gone. You keep the story. You burn the flag that flew over it. And the next week, back at the spinner, another painted woman catches your eye, and the whole doomed romance between you and the cover begins again, exactly as the men in New York intended. You have Peyton Place, and Peyton Place presents a problem the pulps never did, which is that everyone already knows about it. It is too famous to smuggle, too talked about to deny owning, too enormous a phenomenon to pretend you have not at least heard of. So the strategy shifts. You do not hide this one under the mattress. You leave it on the side table in plain sight, and you simply lie, warmly and often, about which parts you actually read and how carefully you read them. It was written by a woman named Grace Metalius, an unknown housewife from Gilmanton, New Hampshire, a place exactly as small and tidy as your own, and she reached under the tidiness and pulled out everything beneath it, the adultery and the incest and the abortion and the ordinary hypocrisy, and printed it where the whole nation could read it, and the whole nation did. It sold 60,000 copies in 10 days. It beat Gone with the Wind, famous, denounced, and utterly unhideable. It was the one book the drugstore could not keep on the shelf. That changes the entire strategy. You cannot hide a phenomenon. You cannot pretend not to have heard of the book every woman on the street is quietly devouring, the book the newspapers denounce and Canada bans outright and the pulpits thunder against by name, because the thundering only sends more people hunting for it. A pulpit denunciation, you have learned, is the best advertising a book can buy, and Peyton Place got the loudest denunciations of the decade. By the time your minister got around to warning you off it, you had already read it twice. So this one lives in plain sight, on the side table, spine out, and you defend it not by hiding it but by managing what you admit. Yes, of course you read it. Everyone read it. It is practically the news. You read it for the portrait of small-town life, the sharp eye, the writing. You did not, you imply, linger on the other chapters. This is the official position, held in common by every woman you know, and it is a lie so universal and so transparent that it has stopped being a lie and become a kind of manners. Grace Metalius herself became the scandal attached to the scandal, and you followed her story with the guilty attention you gave the book. The photographs showed her in rolled jeans and a man's flannel shirt at her typewriter, and the papers nicknamed her Pandora in blue jeans, the woman who opened the box, and her own town reportedly turned on her, and her marriage cracked, and the money and the fame went to work on her like acid. You read every word of it. You also understood, in a way the papers did not, that she had simply written down what everyone knew and no one said, and was being punished for the saying, not the knowing. The book being too big to hide carries its own particular thrill, and you have examined it honestly. The pulps you carried home in shame, alone, one trembling quarter at a time. This one you share openly, at the bridge table, at the beauty parlour, a scandal so large it has become communal, a thing the women can discuss almost in the open because everyone is equally implicated. Safety in numbers, printed and bound. When everyone has read the forbidden book, the book is somehow both more forbidden and perfectly safe, and the contradiction is delicious. So Peyton Place sits on your side table, undenied, unhidden, doing the strange double work of being the most scandalous book in the house and the one you least need to conceal. It is the exception that proves your whole careful rule. Everything else you own is a secret. This one is a confession the entire country made together, out loud, at the top of its lungs, while insisting the whole time that it only read the book for the writing. You have developed a whole vocabulary of denial for the famous books, the ones you cannot pretend not to own. Yes, you read it. Of course you read it. Everyone read it, but you read it for the writing, for the small-town portrait, for the sociology of the thing. You did not linger on the scandalous chapters. You certainly did not reread them. This is what you say at the bridge table with your face perfectly composed, and every woman there says the same thing, and every woman there is lying in exactly the same direction. The bridge table is where the performance reaches its highest form, and you have your part down cold. Someone mentions the book, always, eventually, between the third and fourth hands, and the table performs its little liturgy of denial. Yes, read it. For the writing, of course. Such a sharp portrait of a small town, and you all nod, and no one, not one of you, admits to rereading the chapters everyone reread, and the whole table lies in perfect unison like a choir who all know the same hymn. It sounds warm, practiced, and completely unconvincing. You have refined the denial into an art with several movements. There is the world-weary sigh that says the book was rather overrated. There is the quick pivot to its social value, its unflinching honesty about hypocrisy, its almost anthropological eye. And there is the crucial, delicate distancing, the implication that you personally are a serious reader who happened to pass through this book on your way to better things, rather than a woman who read it twice with a flashlight. Every woman at the table performs the same movements. Every woman knows every other woman is performing them. The comedy of it, which you all feel and none of you acknowledge, is that the denial fools no one and is required anyway. Not one woman at that table believes another read the book for the sociology. The lie is not meant to be believed. It is a ritual, a way of touching the forbidden thing together while keeping the necessary distance, a group agreement to enjoy the scandal without any single one of you being caught enjoying it. You are all guilty and all covered, and the covering is a kind of intimacy, though you would never call it that. Mrs. Farrow, who is bolder than the rest of you, came close once to breaking the liturgy. She said, with a small wicked smile, that she thought a certain chapter was very well done, and let the word certain hang there just long enough for everyone to know exactly which chapter she meant, and the table went still, thrilled and scandalized, on the very edge of honesty. Then someone laughed and dealt the next hand, and the moment closed, the way these moments always close, a half-inch from the truth and no further. You think about Mrs. Farrow's smile sometimes. It was the most honest thing said at that table in years. You understand what the denial is really protecting, and it is not your reputation with each other, since you all know. It is the larger performance, the one for the men and the mothers-in-law and the town, the maintenance of the official story that respectable women do not read such things or, reading them, are not moved. The bridge table rehearses that story so that everyone can perform it flawlessly when it counts. You are not lying to each other. You are practicing together the lie you will all need later. So the cards go around and the coffee goes cold and the denials pile up, and everyone leaves having enjoyed the book twice, once in bed with a flashlight and once at the table pretending she had not. It is exhausting to hold a truth this openly shared and this firmly denied. But it is also, you have to admit, a kind of fun, the particular fun of a secret kept by a whole room full of people who are all in on it, all reaching for the same forbidden thing with the same gloved, deniable hand. You have gotten hold of the Kinsey Report, and it is the least sexy book imaginable, which is the whole point. It is a doorstop of graphs and percentages and dry scientific prose, and you read it the way a nervous patient reads a medical chart, hunting for one specific number. You want to know whether the private facts of your own life put you outside the normal range or inside it. You are not looking for excitement. You are looking for the statistical reassurance that you are not, after all, the only one. It is a fortress of graphs and percentages and prose so dry it could start fires, published in 1953 with the deadening title of a medical text, and you brought it home almost proudly, because who could object to a woman improving herself with a work of science? It sits on the very shelf the pulps could never touch, out in the daylight where the church itself could see it. It is respectable. It is also the most radical thing in the house, dense, dull, and quietly subversive. You do not read it like a novel. You skip the theory and hunt for one specific number, the number that will tell you whether the private facts of your own life fall inside the normal range or outside it. For years you assumed you were a singular case, a defect, the only woman who ever felt whatever it was you felt in the dark and did not say. And here, in cold statistics, gathered from thousands of women exactly as respectable as you, was the news that you were ordinary. Common, even. You read the number twice, then a third time, your thumb holding the place. The relief of that is difficult to describe to anyone who has not needed it. The novels gave you company of a kind, one imagined woman at a time. But the report gave you a census. It told you there were thousands of you, a whole silent population who had felt and wanted the things you had been told no decent woman feels or wants. You were a statistic, and being a statistic in this one case was the most comforting thing that had ever happened to you. The men in Washington understood the danger of exactly that comfort, which is why they made such noise. The report was denounced from pulpits, dragged onto the floor of the House of Representatives, treated as a threat to the nation, and you understood precisely what threat they meant. A woman who believes she is uniquely defective is easy to keep quiet. A woman who has just learned she is one of thousands is a different proposition entirely. The number was dangerous because it ended the loneliness that kept everyone in line, and they raged at a book of graphs as though it were a lit match. You keep the report on the open shelf, and its openness is its own small joke because it is doing more subversive work than any hidden pulp. The novels let you feel less alone for a night. The report proved, in numbers no pulpit could argue with, that the aloneness had been a lie all along, an engineered silence. A whole population of ordinary women, each convinced she was the only one. That is not a feeling, that is evidence. And evidence, unlike a feeling, cannot be talked out of you at the next sermon. So you return to it, the driest book you own, for reassurance, the way you return to a doctor's word that the thing you feared is common and fine. It never moves you, and never fails to steady you. In a decade that worked hard to convince each woman she was uniquely wrong, the Kinsey Report walked in with a clipboard, counted everyone honestly, and quietly informed you that you had been ordinary the whole time. You have never been so glad to be a number in your life. You need the marriage manual, and getting it is its own small operation, because it is not sold like a book at all. It hides behind the counter, or under a clinical title about hygiene and health, dressed up as medicine, so that buying it counts as prudence rather than appetite. You ask for it the way you would ask for something faintly embarrassing at the pharmacy, in a lowered voice, and it comes to you wrapped, and you carry it home understanding that this dull grey volume contains the instructions nobody in your life would ever say aloud. The manual does not sit on the shelf with the novels, because the manual is not pretending to be entertainment. It hides behind the counter, or wears a clinical grey cover and a title full of the word hygiene, dressed as medicine so that buying it counts as prudence rather than appetite. You ask for it in a lowered voice, eyes on the middle distance, and Mr. Pruitt reaches under the counter without comment and slides it across in a paper sleeve, a transaction run like a small drug deal, because, in a sense, it is. It comes grey, clinical, and deeply forbidden. The most famous of them, a fat volume by a Dutch doctor named Van de Velde called Ideal Marriage, has been circulating quietly for decades, passed from bride to bride like a family recipe no one will read aloud. It presents itself as science, all Latin terms and clinical diagrams, and the clinical tone is the whole disguise. A woman can read the frankest instruction imaginable so long as it arrives in the voice of a physician, because a physician is permitted to say what a novelist is not. The grey cover is a lab coat. Underneath it, the book tells you things no one else ever will. The absurdity, which you feel keenly, is that the one book you most need to read is the one hardest to obtain and most shameful to be caught with. Every other kind of ignorance the world rushes to correct. This one it guards. The information a young wife requires simply to understand her own body and her own marriage is locked behind the counter, wrapped in Latin, sold in a plain sleeve, as though knowing how your own life works were a vice to be rationed. You have watched younger women approach this exactly as you once did, red-faced, oblique, unsure even how to phrase the request, and you feel a pang of recognition and a small urge to spare them. Mrs. Pruitt, the pharmacist's wife, is gentler at it than her husband, and the younger brides have learned to come when she is at the counter because she hands the grey book over with a brisk kindness that treats it as exactly what it is, a health matter, nothing to colour up about. She is the closest thing this town has to a sex education, and she runs it out of a drawer. The manual, once you get it home, is both a revelation and a letdown, and you make peace with the mix. It answers questions you did not have the words to ask, which is enormous. It also reads like an appliance instruction, all diagrams and cautions and the romance of a plumbing schematic. But you did not buy it for romance. You bought it for information, the plain functional information a whole civilization decided you should have to smuggle, and it delivers that, dryly, completely, from behind its grey clinical cover. So the manual joins your hidden library, the strangest volume in it, the only one that is technically educational and somehow the most forbidden of all. The novels are dangerous because they make you feel. The manual is dangerous because it makes you know, and knowing, in a wife, was the thing the whole arrangement was quietly built to prevent. You keep it deep in the hiding places, this grey doorstop of plain facts, and you understand that of everything under your mattress, the pure information is what they feared you having most. You think back to your wedding night, and you understand now why the manual exists. Nobody told you anything. Your mother handled the subject with a single strangled sentence and a change of topic. The church handled it with silence, and the doctor assumed you already knew whatever it was you were supposed to know. So you arrived at marriage with essentially no information and a great deal of terror, and the smuggled grey manual, read alone behind a locked door, became the closest thing to an education anyone ever offered you. The one sentence your mother managed came on the morning of the wedding itself. Something vague about how your husband would guide you, delivered while she fussed with your veil and would not quite meet your eye, then dropped for good. That was the curriculum. That was the whole of it. You went to your marriage with the practical knowledge of a woman sent to sea with a hat and good wishes. The church, which had opinions about everything, went silent at exactly the moment its opinions might have been useful. The doctor assumed you already knew whatever it was you were supposed to know, and was too embarrassed to check. The magazines that told you how to keep a husband did not tell you the one thing you most needed to keep him, or yourself. Everyone who might have prepared you had agreed, without ever meeting, to say nothing, and so you arrived at the most intimate event of your life with less instruction than you had received for operating the new washing machine. The result was terror, plain and simple, and a wedding night spent largely in confusion, and a slow private education conducted over the following months by trial, error, and eventually the smuggled grey book read alone behind a locked door. That book taught you what your mother could not say, and the doctor would not, and the church forbade, and you have never forgotten the strange loneliness of learning the basic facts of your own marriage from a Dutch physician's diagrams at midnight, because there was no living person you were allowed to ask. You have decided, quietly and without announcing it, that you will not do this to your own daughter. You do not yet know how you will manage it, given that the words still stick and the whole world still frowns, but you have resolved that she will not go to her marriage as blind as you went to yours. Whatever it costs your composure, you will find the sentences your mother could not find. It is the one promise you have made entirely in silence, and you mean it more than most of the vows you have spoken out loud. There is an anger under all this that you rarely let yourself feel, because feeling it does no good. A whole society decided that a young woman's ignorance of her own body was a form of virtue, and dressed that ignorance up as innocence, and guarded it as though it were precious, when all it ever produced was fear. You were handed a wedding, a household, and a husband, and denied the one small book of facts that might have let you meet all three without dread. So the manual, dry and grey and mortifying to buy, has become in your mind almost a sacred object, the book that finally told you the truth your whole upbringing conspired to keep from you. You keep it hidden with the rest, but it belongs to a different category than the novels. The novels are for the parts of you that want to feel less alone. The manual is for the part of you that simply wanted to know, and was made to beg, in a lowered voice, at a pharmacy counter, for the plainest facts of her own life. You have organized a portion of your inner life around a single ongoing task, which is making sure your husband never finds the books. It is not that he would necessarily rage, though he might. It is the conversation itself you cannot face, the questions about why you want them and what they say about you and what the neighbours would think. So you've become skilled at timing, at hiding, at the fast, smooth motion of sliding a paperback under a cushion when a car turns into the drive. It has become second nature. The hiding is only half the job. The other half is the constant low vigilance, the part of your mind that never fully relaxes, forever tracking where the current book is and how fast it could disappear if a key turned in the door. You have rehearsed the vanish so many times it's become reflex, the smooth motion that slides a paperback under a cushion in the half-second between hearing the car and hearing the door. You are faster than you have any right to be. Practice has made you a magician of the ordinary emergency. You stay watchful, constant, and slightly exhausted. It is not, you have decided, that your husband would rage, exactly, though he might. It is the conversation you cannot face, the questions with no good answers, the why do you want these and what would the neighbours think, delivered in the wounded, bewildered tone of a man discovering his wife is a stranger. You would rather hide 1,000 books than have that talk once. So you hide the 1,000 books, and the talk never comes, and the marriage stays smooth on top precisely because so much of you is filed underneath it where he cannot see. The timing is a science you have mastered without meaning to. You know his schedule better than he does, when he leaves, when he returns, the particular sound his car makes turning off the main road, which gives you 30 seconds of warning. You read in those margins the safe hours, the reliable absences, and you keep one ear always tuned to the driveway, even at your most absorbed. Your husband thinks you have simply grown attentive to his comings and goings. He finds it rather flattering. He has no idea it is an early warning system. A loneliness runs through it that you do not often examine. The person you share a bed with, a name with, a whole life with, is the one person you cannot tell, and he sleeps 8 inches away with no notion of it. You do not think he would understand. You have never given him the chance, which is its own small cowardice, and you know it, and you keep the room locked anyway, because the fear of the conversation is realer to you than the hope of it going well. Every so often the vigilance slips, and those are the bad moments, the ones that keep you careful. A book left a beat too long on the arm of the chair, a cover not quite tucked. The heart lurch when he walks in earlier than expected and your eyes fly to the thing you have not yet hidden. Nothing has ever come of these moments, a matter of luck as much as skill, but each one recharges the vigilance for months, a reminder that the whole careful architecture stands one careless afternoon from collapse. So you carry it, the low permanent watchfulness, quietly and well and without complaint. It is tiring in a way you could never explain to a man who has never had to hide a single thing he wanted in his life. He reads whatever he likes in the open, on the porch, in his chair. You love him. You also watch the driveway while he reads, one ear on the road, the paperback already sliding under the cushion before his car door has finished slamming. You are less afraid of your husband, in the end, than of the 2 other people who might find the books. Your mother-in-law visits without warning and has a habit of tidying, of opening drawers she was not invited to open, of straightening a room until its secrets fall out. And your child, small and curious and utterly without discretion, could find a paperback and carry it, cover up, into the middle of Sunday dinner with a bright question about the lady on the front. You plan your hiding places around these 2 threats above all. Your husband, in the end, is not the one you fear most. The 2 real threats wear house slippers and mean you no harm at all, which is exactly what makes them dangerous. Your mother-in-law arrives without warning and cannot sit in a room without improving it, opening drawers she was never shown, following a nose for disorder that borders on the supernatural. She does not snoop, she would be wounded by the word. She tidies. And tidying, in a house with hidden books, is a slow depth charge you can never quite predict. Gentle, helpful, and utterly devastating. Both of them. You have watched her reorganize a kitchen drawer out of sheer moral energy, alphabetize a spice rack that was doing fine, refold a stack of towels that had committed no crime. Every hiding place you own was chosen with one eye on her helpful hands, and the sanitary napkin box remains your fortress precisely because it is the one container her tidying will never breach. Even she has limits. That squeamishness, the same one that protects you from your husband, protects you from his mother too. A single blush-shaped border that 2 generations of men will not cross. The child is the other threat, and the child is worse, because the child cannot be predicted or reasoned with or counted on to feel shame. A husband who found a book would at least know to be quiet about it. A 5-year-old who finds a paperback with a painted woman on the cover will carry it, face out, held high in 2 proud hands, into the exact center of Sunday dinner, and ask, in the clear, carrying voice children reserve for these occasions, who the pretty sad lady is, and why she has no clothes. There is no recovery from that. You have run the scenario 100 times, and it ends badly every time. So the child reshapes your whole hiding strategy. Nothing can live at a child's height. Nothing can live anywhere small hands explore, which is everywhere, since a curious child is a search party of one that never rests and respects no drawer. The book goes high, goes deep, goes into the one box, even curiosity will not open, and you check its hiding place with a diligence you never needed before the children came, because a husband merely might look and a child absolutely will, cheerfully, at the worst imaginable moment, with an audience. There was one close call, and it lives in you still. Your youngest, prospecting under the bed for a lost ball, came out instead with the edge of something, and your heart stopped clean in your chest, and you crossed the room in a single stride and produced a distraction so sudden and so dazzling, a promise of cookies, that the small hand let go and the moment passed. The ball was found elsewhere. The book was moved that night. You aged a year in 4 seconds and told absolutely no one. So you guard against the gentlest people you know, the ones who love you and would never dream of exposing you, because love and good intentions are no protection against a tidying mother-in-law and a truthful child. The malice of the world you can plan for. It is the innocence you cannot, the helpful hand and the honest voice, and so you hide your books highest of all from the 2 people in the house who would be most horrified to learn they were the reason you had to. You sit in the pew on Sunday and listen to the minister denounce a book by name, and you watch something happen across the congregation that he does not seem to notice. He is warning everyone away from it, describing its filth in enough detail to be useful, and half the women in the room are quietly filing the title away for Wednesday. The pulpit has just done the drugstore's advertising for free. You keep your eyes down and your expression grave, and you make a mental note of the exact title he is so upset about. Reverend Ames has chosen his book this week, and he denounces it thoroughly from the pulpit, by name, describing its filth with a specificity that is, frankly, useful. He means to warn everyone away. What he actually does is read out a shopping list. Earnest, detailed, and wonderfully counterproductive, the sermon works on the room like an advertisement nobody had to pay for. A rhythm runs under it that the whole congregation understands and the pulpit never will. A book gets denounced on Sunday. By Wednesday it is sold out at every drugstore within 20 miles. The denunciation is not a warning, it is an advertisement, the most effective advertising a cheap novel can buy, and it comes free, delivered with passion, by a man who would be horrified to learn he is the single best salesman the paperback industry has in this county. He rails against the tide and turns the tide, and the tide thanks him, silently, from the pews. You have watched a particular sequence play out so many times, it has the reliability of a law of nature. Reverend Ames grows agitated about a title. The agitation lends the title a glamour it might never have earned on its own, and lifts it out of the anonymous stacks into the realm of the genuinely forbidden, which is to say the genuinely desirable. A book no one had noticed becomes, by Sunday noon, the one book everyone must have, purely because a good man stood up and told them not to. Desire, it turns out, loves a locked door more than an open one. The comedy of it is almost too rich to bear in a quiet pew, and you have learned to swallow it. Here is a room full of women who will spend the afternoon looking devout and the evening reading exactly what the morning forbade, and the man at the front, sincere to his bones, has no idea he is the reason. He thinks he is holding back a flood. He is in fact opening the sluice, week after week, with the earnest force of a man who has never once suspected that telling people what they cannot have is the surest way to make them want it. You do feel a flicker of something like pity for him, because his sincerity is real and his failure is total and he will never know it. He believes in the work. He believes the denunciations protect his flock, and his flock sits before him nodding, already composing the week's drugstore itinerary. The gap between what he intends and what he accomplishes is the widest gap in the whole church, and he stands in the middle of it every Sunday, blind and earnest and wrong. So you file the title away with the rest, behind your grave Sunday face, and you drop your envelope in the plate, and you nod at Reverend Ames, and you thank him for the sermon, which you mean in a way he would not enjoy understanding. By Wednesday you will have the book. He will have preached it into your hands himself, from the highest and most respectable perch in town, and gone home believing he saved you from the very thing he sold you. It is the best joke in the county, and no one is allowed to laugh. You have watched the man who owns the drugstore navigate a bind you do not envy, because his livelihood sits on both sides of it. The paperbacks are the steadiest money on his whole floor, quarter after quarter, week after week, more reliable than the greeting cards or the cough drops. But stocking them invites trouble, a visit from a priest, a word from the police, a complaint to the distributor, so he does what a practical man does. He keeps the tamest titles on the rack and the rest in a drawer, for customers he has decided he can trust. His name is Mr. Sokolov, and he works this particular bind, the way a tightrope walker works a wire, with a weary balance he has kept for years by refusing to look down. He needs the paperback money badly, the small, steady river of it. He also cannot entirely afford to be seen needing it, quiet, trusted, and carefully hidden, that drawer. Because stocking the good titles invites trouble, and the trouble comes in several uniforms. A priest with a printed list who would like a word, a policeman doing a favour for the priest, a distributor nervous about a committee, a neighbour who complains to the wrong person. Any of them can turn the steadiest money on the floor into the biggest headache in the store, and Mr. Sokolov has learned, through experience he does not discuss, exactly how much boldness his position can bear before it tips into risk. So he does what a practical man does, which is to split the difference down the middle. The tamest titles go on the rack in the light, where anyone can see them, and no one can object too loudly. The bolder ones go into a drawer behind the counter, produced only for the customers he has decided he can trust, in a quiet transaction that leaves no display for a priest to frown at. He runs, in effect, two stores, a visible one that satisfies the town's idea of itself, and an invisible one that satisfies its actual appetites, and he keeps the wall between them immaculate. You are one of the trusted, which took time to earn, and is never spoken of directly. It is a matter of small signals accumulated over years, a way of asking, a discretion demonstrated, a reliability proven, until one day the drawer simply opened for you where it stays shut for others. There was no ceremony. He did not announce your promotion. He simply reached below the counter one afternoon, without your having to fully ask, and you understood that you had passed some quiet examination you had not known you were taking. The strangest part is the tenderness underneath the transaction, which neither of you will ever name. Mr. Sokolov is not a crusader. He does not stock these books to strike a blow for freedom. He stocks them because women want them and quarters are quarters. But somewhere in the years of quiet drawer openings, of change counted into palms rather than onto counters, of names never spoken, he has become a kind of protector, a man who shields his customers out of a decency he would be embarrassed to have named. He would call it business. You know better. So the two stores run side by side under one roof, the bright respectable one and the quiet real one, and Mr. Sokolov walks the line between them every day, keeping the town's illusions and its appetites both fed. You buy your book from the drawer, wrapped without a word, and you tip the arrangement with a loyalty that never appears on any receipt. He is the closest thing you have to an ally in the open economy of the thing, a merchant who chose, quietly, to be on your side, and who will go to his grave insisting it was only ever about the quarters. You do not know his name and you will never see his face, but there is a man whose job is to decide what you are allowed to read, and he works at the post office. Because the books travel by mail to reach the drugstore, a postal inspector can open a crate, judge its contents obscene, and seize the entire shipment before it ever reaches the rack. He answers to a law written in 1873 by a man named Comstock, and he wields it with the quiet certainty of someone who believes he is protecting you from yourself. He decides at a loading dock, not a courtroom. The books travel to your drugstore by mail, bundled in brown parcels on the same trucks as the magazines, and somewhere along that route a postal inspector can slit a crate, hold a paperback to the light, judge it, obscene, and pull the whole shipment before it ever reaches the rack. No trial, no jury. One man, one crate, one decision, and a book that thousands of women wanted simply never arrives, and no one is told why. The law he swings was written in 1873 by a man named Anthony Comstock, who got himself made a special agent of the post office and spent his life deciding what other people were allowed to receive in the mail. He is long dead. His law is not. It sits behind the counter of every post office in the country, vague and heavy, and enforced by men you will never meet. And it means the real censor of your reading is not a judge or a bishop, but a clerk in a back room, faceless, distant, and completely unaccountable. With a letter opener and a strong opinion, you feel him only as an absence. A title everyone was waiting for does not come. A series stops at the fourth book with no fifth. The rack has a gap in it where a story should be. and you learn to read those gaps the way a farmer reads a killing frost, understanding that somewhere up the line a crate was opened and a decision was made, and the thing you wanted was turned back at the border of the mails. He never shows his face, he just quietly subtracts. The publishers feel him too, and they write their books around him, which is the part that reaches you most directly. This is why the heroine has to be punished, why the happy ending is forbidden, why every story of a certain kind arrives pre-broken. The writers are not choosing the misery. They are dodging the inspector, folding his invisible rules into their plot so the crate makes it through, and you hold the result in your hands every night, a story bent into a shape a stranger at a loading dock would approve. There is something almost funny about the sheer plainness of him, once you picture it. Not a robed censor in a marble hall. A tired federal employee in a room that smells of glue and twine, holding a 25-cent novel about a lonely woman, deciding on behalf of the entire nation that this particular loneliness may not be mailed. He goes home at 5. He has a wife. She may, for all he knows, have 3 of the exact books he condemned that afternoon hidden under the mattress he sleeps on. So you live under a censor you cannot see, cannot argue with, and cannot vote out. A man reduced in your mind to a letter opener and a rule from before your grandmother was born. He shapes every book you own without ever knowing your name, and you resent him the way you resent weather, as a force rather than a person. And still the crates keep coming, most of them through, because for every one he stops 100 slip past him onto the trucks, and the trucks reach the rack, and the rack reaches you, 1 quarter at a time, in gentle defiance of a dead man's law. You read in the newspaper that a committee of the United States Congress has taken an interest in your reading habits, and the detail that stays with you is the method. In order to demonstrate how corrupting these paperbacks are, grave men in Washington have been reading the racy passages aloud into the official record for the protection of the nation. You picture it, the solemn voices, the stenographer taking it all down, the sheer number of people who had to encounter the filth in order to warn everyone else away from it. You have to set the coffee cup down when you read it. To prove how corrupting these books are, grown men, with the full dignity of the nation behind them, have been reading the racy passages aloud, into the official record, for posterity, solemnly, solemn, thorough, and gloriously absurd. The committee has arranged for the filth to be preserved forever in the archives of the Republic, as evidence of why no one should ever read it. The committee has a chairman, a representative named Gathings from Arkansas, and Mr. Gathings is gravely concerned that pocket-sized novels will drive up the crime rate and rot the youth, and he has convened serious men to sit in a serious room and take serious testimony, which consists in large part of the very sentences he wants banned, now typed neatly by a government stenographer who presumably went home with a headache. You picture the stenographer. You feel for the stenographer. Someone had to write it all down. One particular book they keep returning to, a slim thing about women in wartime barracks, and they have decided it is a menace, and they demonstrate its menace by quoting it at length, which sends its sales climbing every time they open their mouths. This is the pattern you know from the pulpit, now performed at the federal level with subpoenas. The more powerfully a thing is denounced, the more people go looking for it, and Congress, like the church, has never once suspected that its outrage is a marketing budget it did not know it was spending. You try to hold the full picture in your head and it keeps sliding into comedy. The most powerful legislature on earth, the body that declares wars and levies taxes, has convened to read aloud from a drugstore paperback, so that it may officially disapprove of the parts it just read aloud. The seriousness is total. The absurdity is total. The two do not cancel out, they simply coexist, the way they do in so much of this decade, and you sip your coffee and marvel that any of it is real. What the committee cannot grasp from inside its serious room is who the enemy actually is. They picture a shadowy industry corrupting an innocent public. The truth is a great many ordinary women reading quietly in bed, women exactly like the wives the congressmen go home to, and you wonder whether any of those wives, tidying the study while their husbands rail against paperbacks, have a slim novel of their own tucked somewhere the committee will never subpoena. Statistically, you think, some of them must. The thought keeps you warm all morning. So the committee investigates, and the record fills with the exact words it means to erase, and the denounced books sell out again, and the whole grave machinery of the state grinds away at a threat it has completely misidentified. You fold the newspaper. You have a book upstairs the committee would love to read into the record, and you are going to finish it tonight, and the United States Congress, for all its power, its subpoenas, its stenographers, and its outrage, is never going to know a single thing about it. That, you decide, is the funniest and truest sentence in the whole morning's news. You have noticed that the church does not confine itself to the pulpit. There is a list, printed and circulated, of books the diocese has condemned, and there are men who take that list into the drugstores in person to make sure the shelves comply. A priest can stand at the shelf, run his eyes down the titles, and have a quiet word with the owner about what ought not to be there. You have learned to tell, from which books have vanished overnight, exactly when the list was last enforced in your town. The book you wanted on Tuesday is gone on Wednesday, and you know exactly what visited the shelf in between, because the gap has a shape you have learned to recognize. A priest walked the aisles with the diocese roster in his hand, had a quiet word at the counter, and by morning a whole row of spines had quietly retired. You never saw it happen. You only ever read the aftermath, the tidy gap where a title stood the week before. You have never seen the enforcement happen, only its results. The way you know a cat has been in the garden by the state of the birds. A whole row of a certain kind of title, present last week, simply absent this week. The shelf rearranged to close the gap so the absence looks natural, but you can read it. You have become fluent in the archaeology of a censored rack, reconstructing from the bare spots exactly which titles came under the list and vanished, a small forensic skill no one taught you and no one else would understand. The man with the list means well, in his way, which is the exhausting thing about nearly everyone in this story. He is not a villain twirling a moustache. He is a serious man who believes sincerely that he is protecting the women of the parish from a poison, and he goes rack to rack in his good coat doing what he understands to be a kindness. That his kindness consists of reaching into your week and removing the one thing in it that made you feel less alone is a consequence he will never see, because he has never once imagined you as the reader. He imagines only the poison, so you adjust as you always do. You learn which drugstores the list reaches and which it misses, which owners cave and which quietly keep a drawer the list never sees. You time your buying to the rhythm of the enforcement, stocking up before a known sweep, going farther afield after one. The list makes your life harder, and it does not stop you. It only adds another layer to the game, another set of movements to master. A grim little lesson hides in watching the list at work, and you have absorbed it without wanting to. The man with the list has not read the books on the list. He does not need to. He knows they are poison the way he knows the catechism, by authority rather than acquaintance, and there is no arguing with a certainty that was never built on evidence in the first place. So the list comes, printed, righteous and utterly uninformed, and the racks thin, and the gaps appear, and you read the gaps and adjust your routes and go on. You have outlasted the pulpit and the committee and the invisible man at the post office, and you will outlast the list too. Not by defeating it, but by being more patient than it, more quietly determined to reach the one thing you came for. The list is powerful on paper, but paper, as you of all people know, is a two-edged thing, and the same mails that carry the condemnation carry, in the next crate, the very books it condemns. You have one book you did not burn, one you kept against all your own rules, and it is falling apart in your hands from the reading. The cheap glue gave up long ago, and the pages come loose in little clusters now, out of order, held together by a rubber band and your memory of where everything goes. You know certain passages by heart. You return to them the way you return to a warm room, and the physical ruin of the book is simply the record of how many nights it has kept you company. You could reassemble it in the dark, and you have, more than once, at 2 a.m., when the order slipped and you needed a particular page and found it by feel among the loose clusters like a mother finding one child's hand in a crowd. Soft, loose, and impossibly loved, that ruin of a book has been with you longer than some of your friendships. You know passages of it by heart, which was never your intention. It simply happened through repetition, the way a hymn you never meant to memorize turns out to live in you complete. There is a paragraph near the middle you go back to again and again, and you do not even read it anymore so much as visit it. The words worn smooth as a stair tread by the traffic of your going back. The book has stopped being an object you read and become a place you go. The physical ruin of it is a kind of diary you never kept. This corner is soft because you have turned it 1,000 times. This page is spotted where you read in the rain by an open window. This whole section falls open on its own, the spine broken exactly there, because that is the part you could not stay away from, and the book remembers your appetite in its very architecture. It is the most honest record of you that exists, and it is falling apart. You should have passed it along years ago, or burned it, by every rule you have ever kept, and you cannot. Some books you can let go because the story lives fine in your head without the object. This one you cannot separate from the paper it came on, the specific cheap paper, the specific smudged print, the specific weight of this exact ruined copy. To lose the object would be to lose a version of yourself that only exists in its company, and so you keep it, against all sense, against all safety, the one permanent tenant among your transient library. You have thought about what happens if it is ever found, this one book you cannot bear to destroy, and the thought is genuinely frightening, because the others you could deny, could explain away, could claim to be holding for a friend. Not this one. This one is too obviously loved. Its ruin testifies. No woman reads a book to pieces like this, and anyone who found it would know, instantly, that they had found something that mattered, which is why it is the most dangerous object you own. So it lives in the deepest hiding place, the rubber-banded ruin, the book read past the point of survival, and every so often you take it out and hold the loose clusters together and visit the worn paragraph and put it back. It is the proof that the whole careful decade of hiding and burning and denying was never really about scandal at all. It was about this. One book, loved past its own binding, kept at real risk, because somewhere in its falling pages a stranger said the truest thing anyone ever said to you, and you were not willing to let that go up the chimney. You understand, on the nights you are honest with yourself, that the book was never really about the scandalous parts. It was about the sentence somewhere in the middle that described a feeling you had carried alone for years and assumed was yours only, a private defect. And there it was, printed, priced at a quarter, proof that someone else had felt it too and had gone to the trouble of writing it down. That is what the walk to the counter was for. Not titillation. Company. The simple news that you were not the only one. The scandalous parts were never the point, and on your honest nights you admit it. You could have lived without the racy chapters, would have survived a lifetime of the tame and the approved. What you could not have survived was the loneliness. One plain line on cheap paper cracked it clean in half. That is what the whole apparatus was for, the browse and the walk and the camouflage and the hiding place, all of it built to deliver one plain, printed, and quietly enormous sentence past a wall of people determined to stop it. The quarter did not buy you a thrill, though it threw one in. The quarter brought you the news, delivered by a stranger you would never meet, that a person could earn a living writing down the exact feeling you thought made you a freak. You remember the first time it happened, the specific jolt of it, reading along in the dark and coming suddenly on a line that described the inside of your own chest, so exactly that. You had to stop and read it again to be sure you had not written it yourself. You had told no one that feeling. You had not had words for it. You underlined it with a thumbnail, the only mark you ever left in a book, and pressed the page flat so the line would stay. The next night you read the whole book again just to arrive back at that one line, and it landed just as hard the second time. And a stranger had the words, had had them all along, had set them in cheap type and mailed them out into the world on the chance that somewhere a woman in a dark bedroom needed to read them. You were that woman. She had been writing to you without knowing your name. This is the thing the censors never understood, and could not have, because understanding it would have required imagining you as a person rather than a threat. They thought they were policing appetite. They were actually policing loneliness, cutting the one wire that connected a woman in one dark bedroom to a woman in another, and every book they seized was a letter between strangers they tore up unread. For the woman on your street who loved other women and had no word for it, no article, no sympathetic soul, the drugstore paperback was not entertainment. It was the only mirror the world allowed her, and she has said, plainly, years later, that the cheap, disreputable, badly printed thing saved her life. You believe her completely, because you passed her once at the far drugstore, choosing slowly, and neither of you said a word. You were not in her exact position, but you were near enough to know that a book can be the difference between a woman who thinks she is a monster and a woman who knows she is a member of a very large and very quiet club. So when you count what the quarter actually bought, across all those years, you do not count scandals, you count the nights. That was the purchase. That was always the purchase. There has never been a better use of 25 cents in the history of the coin. You start to notice, toward the end of the decade, that the books are getting bolder and the raids are getting rarer. A court rules one way, then another, and the invisible man at the post office loses a little more of his power each time. Titles that would have been seized a few years ago now ride through the mail untouched and land on the rack in daylight. You cannot quite believe it at first. You keep buying them the careful old way, the camouflage way, out of a habit that no longer has a reason. The gaps in the rack take longer to appear now, and fill back faster, and titles that would have been seized a few years ago ride through the mail and sit in the light where anyone can lift them. Something is shifting up the line, in rooms you will never enter, and you feel it the way you feel a season turn, before you could name the date. Slow, uneven, and almost unbelievable, the change works its way through the whole squeaking business of your secret life. The change has a source, though it reaches you only as rumour and result. Courts have been ruling. A case in 1957 narrowed what the word obscene is even allowed to mean. Then a publisher deliberately picked a fight, mailed out a famous banned novel about a lady and her gamekeeper on purpose, dared the post office to stop it, and in 1959 a judge said the mails had to carry it. The invisible man at the loading dock lost a little more of his letter opener that year, and the crates he used to turn back began, one by one, to go through. You keep buying the old careful way for a while, out of pure habit, because the body does not learn safety as fast as the law grants it. You still assemble the camouflage purchase. You still slide the book flat under the magazine at the counter, and only halfway through do you realize the clerk did not so much as blink, that no one is watching anymore, that the whole elaborate choreography you perfected over a decade is dancing around a danger that has quietly left the room. Your hands are more frightened than the world now requires. A strange grief mixes into the relief, and you did not expect it. The hiding was terrible, and it was also, in its way, the shape of your days. As the risk drains out, so does a certain charge, the private importance of a thing forbidden. You are glad, truly glad, that your daughter will not have to hide. You are also aware, quietly, that a part of you was built in the hiding, and does not quite know what to do with a book you are simply allowed to own. You watch the younger women and see the difference already taking hold. They buy without the walk, without the sweat, without the year of nerve you spent on every purchase, and they cannot fully imagine what it cost you, which is exactly as it should be and still lands with a small pang. You do not want them to know. You want them to have the openness so completely that the whole underground you lived in becomes unimaginable to them, a strange story their mothers tell, and you are watching that forgetting begin, and it is a victory, and it aches like one. So the mail comes through, and the racks fill, and the fear recedes like a tide, and you stand in the drugstore holding a book in the plain light of the front counter, not hiding it, not smuggling it, just holding it, the way a person holds a thing that is theirs. It feels unnatural. It feels miraculous. It feels like the thing you spent 10 years wanting and never quite believed would arrive. And it arrived not with a trumpet but with a clerk who did not look up, ringing a quarter novel like it was a comb. You watch your daughter grow up into a different world, and the difference is the thing you cannot stop turning over. The book that you smuggled and hid and burned is becoming a television program, broadcast into the very living room where you once denied reading it. The things you learned alone behind a locked door, she will simply be told. She will not need a quarter, a camouflage purchase, or a hiding place under the mattress. Whatever you were, whatever you wanted, she will get to be it out loud, and that is the whole point, though you will never say so. Peyton Place, of all things, is on the air in your own house, and your daughter sits on the rug in front of it, watching in the open what you once took in by flashlight under a locked door. The same network that beams it into the living room would have called the police over the paperback 10 years ago, and now it sells laundry soap in the commercial breaks. You sit behind her on the sofa and feel the whole decade rearrange itself in the light of the screen. She will not need the quarter. That is the sentence that keeps arriving as you watch the back of her head. She will not need the camouflage purchase, the far drugstore, the hiding place, the year of nerve spent on every book. The things you learned alone behind a locked door she will simply be told or handed in the open by a world that has decided that a woman knowing things is not a crime. Whatever you were, whatever you wanted, she will get to be it out loud. You will not tell her what it cost. This is a decision you made long ago and hold to now, watching her watch the screen. You will not sit her down and recite the brows and the burning. The whole point of what you carried was that she should not have to carry it, and to hand her the weight now would be to make her pay a tax on a freedom you tried to give her free and clear, so you keep it. It is your last and best act of hiding. There is one book you will keep forever, the ruined one, the rubber-banded one you read to pieces, and you have decided she may find it someday, after you are gone, and make of it what she will. She will not understand at first why a woman would love a cheap old paperback into that condition. She will not know the drives or the drawers or the dark, but she will feel, holding the soft worn thing, that it mattered enormously to someone, and that someone was her mother, and maybe that will be enough. You think, sometimes, of all the women on all the streets who ran the same quiet operation, the whole vast underground that never once knew its own size because it was never allowed to look like a movement. They are all, right now, sitting behind their own daughters, watching the same screen, feeling the same thing. 1,000,000 private rebellions, conducted alone, all arriving at the same open evening at once. The Kinsey Report tried to tell you. Now the television is telling your daughter, and she believes it without effort. So you sit in the blue light and watch your daughter watch the future, and inside you something that spent a decade clenched slowly lets go. The books came out from under the mattress. They came out into the living room, onto the screen, into the evening itself, open, ordinary, and completely unafraid, a little worn at the corners, having done their quiet work in the dark. You do not say a word. You just let her watch it, in the open, the thing you would once have burned by morning. You spent the night crouched at a squeaking wire rack, smuggling a 25-cent scandal past a deacon, burying it in the one box no man in the house will ever open, reading it by the thin gold thread of light under the door, and feeding the evidence to the stove before the coffee was on. You matched a great deal of thread you did not need. You lied, warmly and often, at the bridge table about which chapters you actually read. It is easy to smile at the whole careful operation, the casseroles passing books through the fence, the beauty parlour humming under the dryer, the mother-in-law and her terrible helpful hands. But there were real women who ran it, on real streets, one trembling quarter at a time, and they were quietly braver than any painted cover they ever hid. Most of them wanted one small thing. Not scandal, whatever the pulpits believed. A sentence somewhere in the middle of a cheap paperback that said the feeling they had carried alone for years had a name and a neighbour and a whole quiet club they never knew they belonged to. That was the real cargo the whole trembling business existed to smuggle home. A quarter for the news that you were not the only one. Thank you for spending this hour with them, and with me, here in the dark where the reading always happened best. You do not have to hide anything tonight. There is nothing to burn by morning, so let your hands unclench from the book that isn't there. Let your shoulders drop down into the pillow. Let the house go quiet around you, the furnace ticking, the light under the door going soft and gold and then gone. Sleep well.